Okay. All right. So, good morning, guys, or good afternoon. I assume that those who are working in or not working in the evening are not online right now. So I want to welcome you to today's presentation, where we'll talk about the Philips HearLink 50, IIC and CIC, in order to bring about our current most advanced capabilities into this tiny, compact, and very discreet custom fit styles. So moving on, I know that some of you have just started fitting HearLink, so I will revisit some of the more important features behind the sound processing, which is SoundMap 3. And after that, I will then talk about the different parts. So here, as you see on the agenda, we have the hardware. Then we'll talk about the difference in terms of the technology found in this CIC and IIC from HearLink 50. And then I'll talk about the updates in the software and also the app. And I'm really looking forward to talking about the case study because I can finally talk about something audiological, of course. So it's not only about the product, but how you assess and how you program and fit and use it that matters. And then we'll end with the Q&A and of course some reminders for you guys, okay? So as a trusted hearing care brand for millions worldwide, Philips HearLink Solutions is really committed to enhancing lives, including those with, of course, hearing loss. And the IIC, which is invisible in the canal and completely in the canal, and the CIC models are currently our most discreet hearing aids, offering exceptional sound quality with the latest SoundMap 3 technology. So these styles of hearing aids are really uniquely tailored to fit your client's ears and ear canals, reducing the noise, of course, improving the wearing comfort, and enhancing hearing by using the pinna effect to have this more spatial hearing awareness. So the natural directionality and the wind protection ensures that despite the small size, sound quality is definitely not compromised. And if those are not benefits enough, these custom styles also make sure that the devices are less visible and more convenient for those using phones and headsets, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Certainly in my experience as a hearing care professional, I also noted that a lot of my customers who are really happy answering the phone normally like this are often wearing custom devices. So I think there's some kind of connection there. So the new Philips HearLink 50 IIC and CIC take the power of the HearLink 50 technology into this really compact size of the customs. And here you can see that these two small styles join the rechargeable mini right in the HearLink 50 portfolio, expanding the range and the user experience with the latest innovations in hearing technology. Of course, powered by SoundMap 3, the HearLink 50 IIC and CIC provide one of the best hearing technologies in the market in a very ultra-discreet and custom-made solution. So now let's just take a deeper dive into the HearLink 50 custom hardware by using the CIC as an example, and then we'll slowly take a look at the function of each component. Shall we? Let's start from the very left. You see that there's a zinc air battery, and here is basically an overview of the main building blocks of the HearLink 50 CIC. So as you can see, the HearLink IIC and also the CIC, of course, uses the zinc air disposable battery. Let me use my pen here. Okay, so I feel like a teacher here. So we use the disposable zinc air battery in size 10 for both styles. And then on the faceplate, you will see this push button for changing the programs and of course the volume level. Here you will also see the T-cap So that is basically the filter protecting the microphones from any dirt or any contact noises where you touch the hearing aid. And then you can see here the microphone. So the microphone is placed just behind the inlet to gather the sounds from the environment, and that's what it looks like. And then here, this tiny thing right here is actually the near field magnetic induction coil, which makes sure that all the binaural functionalities, later we'll talk more about that, are available. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget the chipset. That's basically the engine of the whole hearing aid, and that's where most of the signal processing occurs. And then this is the speaker, which is the same as those that we actually used from HearLink 30 custom. So it's the same. And outside the speaker is the suspension. So the speaker suspension. And this is really important, especially for more powerful hearing aids, because the speaker suspension holds and keeps the hearing aids stable inside the custom device. And by doing so, it reduces the physical vibration coming from the speaker back to the microphone, thereby reducing the risk of feedback. Of course, it also protects the speaker from any humidity or sweat or dirt. So that's the main point of having a really good speaker suspension. And then finally, just at the very right here, we have the Pro Wax Mini Fit, which protects all these components inside from the earwax or dirt coming from the ear canal. So the invisible in canal style is currently our most discreet custom solution, and is actually the strong preference for many hearing aid users regardless of their experience with hearing aids. So the IIC uses a size 10 battery, and it has two speaker options, which is 75 and 90. So we can say that it definitely covers a wide range of hearing losses, including severe hearing losses. And since there is only one automatic program for the IIC, the user does not need to operate the hearing aids in any way, making it a really user-friendly choice for those who don't want to bother adjusting the hearing aids. And of course, in order to keep this IIC style as small and as invisible as possible, certain features and options are not available for IIC. And that includes the NFMI, meaning there's no binaural noise management, there's no binaural program or volume control. And yeah, I don't think they are very critical, because the fact that the IIC is actually very deeply placed inside the ear will already allow the spatial awareness that could be a good replacement of this binaural noise management. Okay, the second thing that the IIC do not have is the push button. So there's only one program, which is P1. You cannot change the volume or the program. There's no manual control for that. And also in the same vein, since we don't have an FMI and the push button, we also will not have the tinnitus sound support for the IIC, because it requires both of these NFMI and push button. So that's it for the IIC. Now let's talk about the CIC. So the completely in the canal style offers a little more flexibility compared to the IIC. As you can see, the IIC is a discrete solution in cases where an IIC is not a good fit for the ear canal or the user for different reasons, needs. And also you can see that in terms of functionality, it also depends on the lifestyle that they have. So the biggest difference with this completely in the canal solution is that the NFMI and also the push button is now an option. So you can choose to have it, or you can also choose to not have it if you want a smaller IIC, of course. And the good thing about this is because we have NFMI and the push button, we have an option providing binaural noise management and also binaural coordination for programs and volumes. And of course, we will also have tinnitus sound support. And one important thing that you guys probably already know if you are selling custom HearLink devices is that the 2.4 gigahertz option is only available for the ITC and ITE styles. And that is because, of course, the 2.4 gigahertz coil, it really requires a lot of space. So it's just a matter of trying to see what is the more important aspect when it comes to choosing the style for your client. I can see that someone asked a question in the chat, so I'll get back to you, okay? But in order to go with the flow, we'll just continue. I'll answer it later, okay? So now let's talk about the custom hearing aid colors, which is available for the HearLink 50 IIC and CIC. As you can see here, it's available in 5 colors. You have black, dark brown, medium brown, light brown, and beige. And these colors are available both for the shell and also for the faceplate that you see here. And of course, the shells are also available in the transparent, clear styles that's available. And that includes also the red and the blue transparent style. Only difference is the only faceplate available will be black. So you have to specify this and write this in your order form, depending on what is available in your market. I'm not sure, it depends. But if that is available, just know that it's also an option. And when it comes to the Philips HearLink 50 Customs, it will also have the laser markings that you see here. Either it's standard as what is shown in the picture, or you can also have it customized. If you do have the standard marking, normally it would include the product brand, which is Philips. It would include the product name and also the style, HearLink 50 CIC, that's the serial number, and the year that it was produced. So this is the standard marking that we have. And for IIC specifically, we also have a color dot, which means there is a red dot for the right and a blue dot for the left. So that is the standard for an IIC. And if you want a customized marking, that will also depend on your market and what is available in your order form. But just so you know, that's what it looks like. And some key things regarding the NFMI, I mentioned this a bit earlier. And basically, as all of you know, it really enables continuous communication between the two hearing aids. And of course, since NFMI is really a useful option, depending on what is needed, it actually allows 4 functionalities. So NFMI allows binaural noise management, it allows tinnitus sound support, it allows binaural volume adjustment and binaural program adjustment. And again, this option is only available for the CICs. And if you do want tinnitus sound support, make sure that you select not only NFMI, but also a push button, okay? So the expected battery life will depend on the user behavior as well as the speaker level. So here on this slide, you will see the average battery performance for these 2 styles. So you can see here that it's around 30 hours to maximum of 55. And if you translate that to days, it would be roughly 3 to 4 days. So as you can see, the 90 dB speaker might have a shorter battery life due to the higher battery usage because of a higher power output. And you should also note that for the CIC, which might have more features than IIC, they generally also include and use more power compared to the IIC. And one last thing you should know is that the HearLink 50 IIC and CIC might have a slightly shorter battery life compared to a HearLink 30 IIC CIC because of the more advanced SoundMap 3 processing. And also the fact that for the HearLink 50, the bandwidth is expanded all the way down to 80 Hertz instead of the usual 200 Hertz for a HearLink 30 IIC and CIC device. So these things might cause the battery life to be slightly lower, just so you guys know, okay? And of course, the ProAx MiniFit functions exactly the same way as you already know. Only difference is you have a really nice style here. So the handles are definitely redesigned to use up to 53% reduction in plastic. So the functionality is the same, but the style will be new. And one thing which you probably hear a lot of the time is this pinna effect, right? So basically that's a term used to describe how people with normal hearing understand their listening environment thanks to the natural spatial cues provided by the pinna. And the reason why our pinnas are shaped like this, it's really for a good reason. And this is basically to help the listener localize the sound sources. So specifically, localizing the sounds horizontally and also vertically from top to bottom. And also it helps us localize from front and also to back. This also helps us also find out how far the sounds is. So all of these things are possible just because of the fact that our pinnas are shaped like this. And that is really cool if you think about it. Of course, one good thing about having an IIC or a CIC with a single microphone deep inside the ear canal is that you are able to benefit from all of these pinna cues. So I think that's really one thing that these two styles, especially the IIC, has as an advantage. And that also explains, I think, why those who are used to custom instruments find it really hard to get used to behind the ear instruments because the microphones are placed differently inside the ear canal versus at the top of the ears. And that gives a different, listening experience. And of course, your microphone inlets need protection, which is why we have the T-cap. As you can see here, it's basically designed to prevent dust or dirt from entering the microphone. And of course, it also protects against insertion noise. For example, when you're placing the hearing aid inside the ear canal. So the T-caps are available in different colors and they can be changed with this dedicated tool that you see on the right. So on one end, you would see a fork and that basically fits it fits the shape of the T-cap, where what you do is you try to put this fork under the T-cap mushroom. So you try to put that in, and then if you want to replace it, you simply push the fork under this mushroom top of the old T-cap, and then you simply lift it out. After that, you can see at the other end of this tool is the brand new T-cap, where you can just push into the microphone, twist it slightly, and then pull. And then you have a new T-cap. And sometimes that really makes a difference in terms of the sound that your client hears. So don't forget to check this once in a while. And now that we've discussed the hardware, let's dive into the SoundMap 3 sound technology, which ensures this really premium, top-of-the-range sound quality for an even cleaner and better speech. So for those who has been with us since 2020, 2019, those of you who are our older customers, you know that SoundMap has always been at the heart of the Philips AI sound technology, with the goal of allowing the client to hear speech clearly. That's a very clear goal, right? So no fancy explanation here. We just want the client to have a better life because of better hearing. And now with Philips HearLink 50, along with the rest of the HearLink family of hearing aids, we know that it's fundamentally based on 3 pillars of sound processing. So as you can see, we have SoundMap noise control, and that is the sophisticated noise control technology to provide a more comfortable listening experience while at the same time promoting speech clarity. And then we have the SoundMap amplification. So that is advanced amplification that makes sure we preserve that speech detail and information in varying noise levels. And then finally, the third pillar is the SoundMap feedback canceller. And essentially, it uses a breaker signal to quickly detect and eliminate feedback before it even becomes audible. So the highlights of having SoundMap 3 in these tiny devices include features such as improved AI noise reduction, extended frequency bandwidth and dynamic range, and of course, the SoundProtect Transient Noise Reduction to ensure that the clients hear more of the sounds that they love. And looking at the first one, we now have an updated AI noise reduction system. So compared to HearLink 30, we have a more enhanced and more advanced AI training process for higher resolution compared to the previous HearLink 30 IIC and CIC and ITC instruments. So this improvement basically allows the AI noise reduction to attenuate more noise, particularly in the low and also mid frequencies. In addition, there is more attenuation between adjacent frequency bands while keeping the speech clear. So as a result, it can offer this really stronger noise reduction, especially for diffuse types of noises, for example, in the traffic or in a crowd noise. And this really works while supporting this ideal sound quality. And this is available as a new very high setting, which can reduce more noise up to 12 dB in very noisy listening environments and provides a stronger setting compared to the previous technology within the custom range. So this very high setting, of course, remember guys, it's only available in the highest price point, which is $90.50. And this graph demonstrates the results of a technical measurement that we did in-house, basically demonstrating the power of the updated AI noise reduction within the HearLink 50 CIC. So the study was conducted using a mannequin facing the loudspeaker and played noise. So the noise level was then measured with and without, here, with and without noise reduction, and the difference between the noise levels was then calculated. So you can see here in the yellow line, that is with the noise reduction off, and then when the AI noise reduction was activated, there was a decrease in noise by up to 12 decibel, demonstrating that although the CIC is really smaller, it doesn't compromise on noise reduction technology. So HearLink 50 also brings some important or improvements that allows for the lower bandwidth to be extended from 200 Hertz further down to 80 Hertz. And this applies for all programs using the microphone input and for all fitting rationales in all HearLink 50 technology levels. And this change will allow more access to low frequency sounds, especially for clients with severe low frequency hearing loss. It could also increase sound quality with an expanded bandwidth for a fuller spectrum of music, and also for clarity for loud sounds without distortion. SoundProtect reduces sudden sounds. That includes coffee grinders, or someone tapping on the keyboard, or when you're going outside. And basically it does all of this without reducing the audibility of speech. So compared to HearLink 40, the algorithm that we use for HearLink 50 is more updated to have an even faster detection and reduction of sudden sounds. And this helps balance all of these transient sounds in the overall sound scene. And here's an easy way to explain the benefits of each technology level in a way that matches the lifestyle needs of your client. So of course, Philips HearLink 9050 ensures that the client is prepared for all kinds of environment. So most importantly, as you can see, in a very noisy restaurant and in a very noisy party. While at the other end, you have HearLink 3050, which is shown to be more suitable for a client who lives a more quiet lifestyle. So this is a very easy way to show your customer and how to match their needs with the performance level offered for the HearLink 50 family. Now, let's quickly run through what you need to know when connecting the HearLink 50, CIC, and IIC. And of course, this also applies for the other families, HearLink families, to Philips HearSuite. As you can see in this picture, we recommend the High Pro 2 for cabled programming of the HearLink 50, IIC, and CIC. The other programming devices currently supported include Express Link 3 and the older High Pro USB or the older High Pro. Just keep in mind that if you use the older programming interfaces, you can definitely expect a slower programming and firmware update time. So that's one thing you should take note of. And of course, you also need a special connector, and that's called the Programming Adapter Mini, which is the one that you see on the right. And you need this to connect the IIC and the CIC device to Philips HearSuite. So in order to use the Programming Adapter Mini, you must, of course, first connect this adapter to this cable. So that's cable number 3. Make sure that you align the dots. So there should be a dot somewhere here and a dot somewhere here, and then you connect it basically. After that, detach the battery drawer by opening it approximately halfway and then gently pulling it out carefully. And after you take out the battery drawer, we go to step number 3, which is you can now insert the Programming Adapter Mini that you see here into the battery compartment instead of the battery drawer. And then you can now connect to HearSuite. Congratulations, you can start programming. Of course, you need to make sure you have the 2025.1 version of Philips HearSuite in order to see the new custom styles that you see here. And it's now available under Instrument Acoustics. And one new thing we have also updated in the software is the expanded spoken notifications. So previously, there was a spoken notification for a low battery warning, but now we also have another one for shutdown, program change, service check mode, and of course the end of battery life, just before it dies. So it's currently supported in 8 languages, if I'm not wrong. That includes English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, and Danish. And of course, as you can see here, you can choose either the tone, so that's the beeps, or you can choose the newer spoken notifications by simply selecting and toggling on these symbols. One thing you should also keep in mind is that this feature is only available for HearLink 50 hearing aids. And the firmware should also be 1.2.0. So these are the 2 things in order to get the new spoken notification features. And let's quickly go through the hearing aid firmware updates, not only for HearLink 50, but also for 40 and 30. So as part of the Philips HearSuite 2025.1 software, we also have new firmware updates for our hearing aid families. So for the HearLink 50 firmware version, the newest one that we have is 1.2.0, which includes performance improvements like you can see here, including enabled feedback management measurements while doing a remote fitting session, We also have a new comfort pulse control in the Philips HearLink 2 app, and this is a feature under tinnitus sound support if that is activated in HearSuite. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we also have more choices for spoken indicators and of course, various improvements for overall better connectivity and performance. What about for HearLink 40? The newest version we have is 1.1.2, and this allows for improved connectivity for iPhone and iPad, supporting faster connection time and startup time for the app. It also allows compatibility for the new Comfort Pulse control in the Philips HearLink 2 app and general performance improvements. So if you have experience, the usual connectivity issues that includes Android and occasionally Apple products, then it would definitely be good for you if you make sure that the firmware version of HearLink 50, 40, and 30 are updated. And as I mentioned before, the newest version we have for HearLink 30 would be 1.4.5 for improved connectivity again, especially with the iPhone and the iPad. So you have a faster connection time and also a startup time for the HearLink 2 app. So the lesson here, guys, simple. Update the firmware whenever a patient comes to you, if it's not updated already. Speaking of the app, let's quickly review the new features and functions available in the Philips HearLink 2 app version 1.5.0. Guys, I don't expect you to remember the numbers, okay? That's why you'll see this later in the handout. So as you can see, the new version focuses on giving, there's no big features, but it definitely gives a smoother user experience for your client. And that includes the new Comfort Pulse tinnitus feature, which allows your clients to personalize the tinnitus relief sound on the go with their app. And you also have the new reconnection experience when the hearing aids disconnect from the app. And there is also an enhanced initial pairing flow for iPhone with Philips hearing aids. So let's first talk about the new Comfort Pulse. Well, actually, it's not really new. The only difference is now the client can adjust the modulation on their own instead of relying on you to do it in HearSuite, okay? So the Philips HearLink 2 app now allows your client to adjust this modulation pattern of the tinnitus relief sound using Comfort Pulse. And that is this button right here that is available with version 1.5. With Comfort Pulse, your client can now select from 4 patterns within the app to manage your tinnitus, and each of these patterns applies a different modulation to the broadband tinnitus sound. And in order to access Comfort Pulse via this phone, this HearLink 2 app, just make sure that you, as an HCP, enables the tinnitus sound support on HearSuite, okay? Then this will show up in the client's app. So once the client decides to adjust it on their own, they just simply click on this button right here. And they can then fine-tune the modulation as they want. And probably if you often use this feature, you would also notice that the reliever label is changed to sounds in the tinnitus program. And one final thing is that Comfort Pulse is available for also all Philips HearLink 40 hearing aids, in addition to HearLink 50 hearing aids. And it's important also to note that they do need 2.4 gigahertz. So this is what it looks like after they click on the Comfort Pulse icon. This pops out. So the client can select their preferred sound pattern with constant as the default. That's the first one, meaning there's no modulation in terms of the amplitude. It's just a very flat sound. Then here we have tranquil, where the sound pulsation is very slow and calm all the way to bustling. So this is the bustling sound, where the sound pulsation is very fast and very lively, and this is ideal for clients who really enjoy the constant changes in the tinnitus relief sound, so they can all do this in their app. Here you can see the recommended settings in Philips HearSuite to enable Comfort Pulse. So under Fit Instrument, and then you go to Tinnitus Sound Support, make sure that you turn on this button, which is Tinnitus Sound Support. And then you can select between the different broadband sounds that you see in this box. So that will be shaped, white, pink, or red. And if you choose an ocean sound as the tinnitus relief sound, then Comfort Pulse will not be available in the app. Okay, so take note of this. So if you select any one of the four modulation settings from the drop-down menu here, as I highlighted, this will be the default Comfort Pulse setting in the client's app. Next, the Philips HearLink 2 app has now been updated to provide even more meaningful information to help the client understand if and when they actually need to troubleshoot connection issues. So in moments of disconnection, the user is now prompted to wait for a connection to occur, as seen on this picture on the first, that's the first screen. So this is to prevent the client from being stressed or alarmed or attempting to troubleshoot when the devices are simply not in range or establishing connection. So if the users wait longer than 5 seconds for connection, they are reassured to wait even longer for the connection to be established. And when the connection is not established, the client is shown the message that the app cannot connect. So it's this one. Then they are directed to a troubleshooting menu if the disconnection lasts longer than 30 seconds. And then if the reconnection occurs while the user is in the troubleshooting menu, the client is then notified as shown in the lower section of the screen. So this is a bit more supportive in terms of any connection or disconnection issues, and your client can be assured that they have an idea what's actually happening in the app. When the connection to the hearing aids cannot be reestablished, either with 1 or with 2 hearing aids disconnected, the information is shown at the back. So here at the back, you will see some suggestions for the clients on what to do if the hearing aids are also disconnected. And they are also informed when the connection to the hearing aids are reestablished, and then they can just click OK and continue using the app. And then the last improvement that we've had with this new HearLink 2 version is for first-time pairing with iPhones. So it is now easier since clients will actually be prompted with a direct link to the pairing menu within the iPhone settings. So the client simply needs to click on Open Settings, and then it would lead them to the pairing settings. So they don't have to navigate the complex settings found in these iPhone devices. And of course, to ensure that your clients receives the best user experience, we always recommend you to recommend them to keep their phones updated with the latest operating system software version available. For clients using an iPhone, iOS 15.2 or later is recommended, and for Android phones, an Android OS version 10.0 or later is recommended. Android users who upgrade to Android OS 10 and newer will also benefit from security enhancements. And in addition to that, we also have faster development and improved user experience. Okay, now let me drink my coffee. Maybe we can go to the chat now and see what's up. P1 in Formula One means the best, so we'll take it. Ah, okay. Yes, if a client is happy, what's not broken, we don't need to fix it, okay? Okay, so now on to the exciting part, personally, at least for me. We'll talk about a case study where we discuss basic principles and good practices when preparing to fit an IIC device. So as most of you in the hearing aid industry know, when you're fitting an ear mold for superpower BTE or micro molds for a mini right device or even the occasional CIC or IIC, an optimal fit for these earpieces, all of them start with getting a really good ear impression. Because when you make a high quality ear impression, you actually get a more comfortable fit. You also will see that the devices look better on the ear and are more discreet. You have increased higher gain. You have a natural sound experience, less feedback, and potentially even less occlusion. Of course, this depends on the ears, but we'll talk about that later. But since we're talking about the IIC and CIC for this presentation, we'll be looking at a case study that shows just how good and important a good ear impression is for an optimal IIC fitting. So audiological performance of custom hearing aids depend on the individual placement in the ear canal. So a good ear impression that goes beyond the second bend is really crucial for the optimal placement of an IIC and CIC hearing aid. So for this case study, we took one short and one deep ear impression from 5 different people, and in addition to a fake ear from a Carl mannequin. We then made an IIC hearing aid using the short impression and another IIC hearing aid from the deep impression. We then measured 3 things while comparing the short and deep impression IICs. So we measured the aided response, the wind noise, and the occlusion effect to see how big of a difference a good ear impression can make with an IIC. So it's very important to get a great ear impression for a great fitting IIC. An ear impression for an IIC must have the first bend and also the second bend, ideally several millimeters beyond the second bend. Ideally, the IIC should be behind the first bend of the ear canal, preferably with the end 2 millimeters behind the second bend of the ear canal. So in order to make sure that the IIC looks good and is not obvious, it should be behind the first bend. And overall, once you have the actual IIC in your clinic with you, the length of the IIC should be between 10 to 14 millimeters. The ideal length would probably be around 12, as you can see in this picture. So those are the general principles you should keep in mind. It should go beyond the second bend, a few millimeters beyond, and then once you have the actual IIC, ideally it should fit all the way behind the first bend. Now let's look at one example of the deep impression and a short impression. So as you can see on the picture, the deep impression has the first and the second bend, and it even goes beyond a few millimeters beyond the second bend. And then as you can see for the short impression on the right, we have the first bend, but then it is actually cut off at the second bend. So we don't have that extra impression beyond the second bend. And this really makes a big difference when you order a CIC or an IIC device. Then we made an IIC out of the short impression and another IIC from the deep impression from the same person, okay? Same ears, different impression, different IICs. So remember, both IICs in this photo, they're from exactly the same ear canal. As you can see on the left, the short IIC only goes around the first bend of the ear canal, so the faceplate of the IIC will be more visible in the ear. And then on the right, the deep IIC goes around the second bend of the ear canal for a much deeper placement inside the ear. So if you look in this picture, you can barely see the faceplate because the IIC is actually so much deeper. And that's just based on how it looks, okay? And it's also amazing how big of a difference you can get just by getting a deeper ear impression. And they totally look different despite having come from the same ear. So aside from how it looks, of course, it's also important to see the difference in terms of the gain, right? And for this, we measured the aided response using the real ear measures on a Carl mannequin. So the real ear aided response, or the REAR, is the frequency response of the hearing aid that is turned on. So we measure from 125 hertz all the way to 8,000 hertz. And with this aided response, we are measuring the sound of the hearing aid turned on inside the ear canal for a particular input signal. So the measurements show that the aided response for the deep IIC, that's the sky blue color, is actually higher than the aided response for the short IIC, which is the dark blue color. So this difference is basically due to the deeper placement of the deep IIC, which overall results in less distance between the IIC speaker and also the tympanic membrane. So this is what we get. And then now, after the deep and short impression IICs were adjusted to basically have the same gain or output in the fitting software, this time we measured the wind noise levels from the front and also the wind coming from the side, also using a real ear measurement on this Carl head mannequin. So the ear fitted with the hearing aid is inside here, and it was basically aligned with the center of the wind machine at around 40 centimeter distance, as you can see in this photo. And the wind speed was set to approximately 8 meters per second at the position of the ear. So it's around ear level. So here are the noise levels from the wind coming from the front on the short and also the deep IIC. So here is the short IIC. That's the measured gain coming from the wind. Of course, wind is generally more focused on low frequency, which is why you can see here it's super high for the short ear impression IIC. But now let's see how much wind is reduced by having a deep ear impression IIC. There you go. Wonderful. You can see the decrease in gain all throughout the frequency range just by having a deeper IIC. So basically, the results show that the deep IIC has less wind noise than the short IIC, and this is because the microphone of the deep IIC is really placed deep into the ear canal, so that means it is protected from wind noise. And as a comparison, I'll now put here right at the middle. So this is this blue line right here. This is actually the HearLink Mini Right with the SoundProtect turned on. So it's somewhere in between. So you can see that the deep IIC outperforms even the Mini Right with the SoundProtect on. So just food for thought, guys. Of course, we also measured the noise levels from the wind coming this time instead of the front. We measured it from the side. So here is the short IIC, and here is the deep IIC. Again, we see lower sound pressure levels with a deeper IIC. And as a comparison, this is also the Mini Right with SoundProtect turned on. So the deep IIC, that would be the sky blue color that you see right here, it still does well, even with the wind coming from the side, because again, the microphone is placed deep into the ear canal. And one thing I just want to emphasize to you guys is that this basic principle applies to all IIC. So the deeper the ear impression, the deeper the IIC can go in, and no matter what brand, what hearing aid family, you only need to remember that the smaller the IIC is, the deeper it is, the more benefits you get from an IIC. All right, now let's compare the feeling of occlusion for a short and a deep IIC. But before I do that, let's start first and review some basic concepts related to occlusion. So first, what is the occlusion effect? The occlusion effect is the increase in the sound pressure level that occurs when the hearing aid is inserted into the ear canal and turned off. So basically, no sound is coming from the hearing aid. It's only stuck in the ear. And the occlusion effect is due to the fact that the hearing aid occludes the ear canal, which prevents sound from escaping. So the occlusion effect is most obviously heard, of course, in the low frequencies. So your clients may start complaining, oh, there's this sound in my head. It feels like I'm in a barrel. My own voice sounds very boomy. It's very deep. It's very bass. And that's the occlusion effect. It's really challenging to measure because each individual experiences occlusion very differently. Some will feel it more than others, and it's really hard to predict which exact client will experience it more. So with all of that taken into account, let's take a look at the test setup and the subjective and objective measurements that we did. So for this case study, we had 5 participants again, which we used to measure the occlusion effect. So each participant has 2 pairs of IIC made, one from the short ear impression and another one from the deep ear impression. The participants then rated the IICs on a scale from 1 to 5. So 1 means it's completely blocked, it's completely occluded, I don't like it, it sucks. Or maybe they like it, I don't know. And then 5 is more open, that means it seems like, they don't feel any occlusion effect. It feels like they're not wearing any hearing aids. So 5 is a good number, the higher the better. The results showed that 4 of the participants blindly ranked the deep IIC as less occluding than the short IIC, and then the 5th participant did not notice a difference. So the participant who did not notice the difference was the only one that did not also show any clear trend of higher occlusion from the short IIC. And also for this last participant, the deep impression IIC did not go around the second bend, probably because the ear canals were simply too small. So this shows that occlusion can be really subjective and also depend on a variety of factors such as the shape and the size of the ear canal. And of course, we don't only ask subjectively how they feel, we also try to measure this occlusion effect using real ear measurements. So first, let's discuss some terminology before looking at the objective occlusion measurements. So on this slide, you see the real ear measurement graph of one of the test participants while they were vocalizing the sound of E. So the first thing I want you guys to familiarize yourselves with is the term REUR, which stands for Real Ear Unaided Response. Basically, it's a measure of the sound pressure level of a sound in the ear canal without any hearing aids inside. So REUR is typically obtained to provide this base reference when measuring the real ear insertion gain. And in this graph, the REUR is the blue shaded area. So that is the sound of this E without any hearing aids in the ear canal. Now, when measuring the occlusion effect, the second thing you should look at is the REOR, or the real ear occluded response. So basically, the REOR is the sound pressure level across frequencies measured in the ear canal with the hearing aid inside but turned off. And even though we use REOR to measure occlusion in this example, its primary purpose is actually to determine the characteristic of the vent. So the REOR is the green shaded area in this graph. As you can see in the graph, there is quite a difference in terms of the low frequency response in the ear canal when the hearing aid is inside but turned off and without any hearing aids. And this difference is really pronounced in the low frequencies in this area. So now let's look at the graphs of two of our test participants. Now let's look at the occlusion measured with an interacoustics affinity REM system. So we're using here the visual speech mapping protocol, and we also selected live voice as the test signal so that we could record the unaided and occluded response of the participant's own voice. So the participants, at least for the first one, he vocalized the sound E and also oo, unaided without any IIC inserted for a baseline measurement. So that would be the blue curve that you see there. And then the participants started vocalizing the sound E and oo with the short and the deep IICs in the ear. So you can see in the colors here, we have the baseline, which is the purple one or the blue one, I'm not sure. And for the sound E, you can see here, that's the baseline. And the purple curve in the graph, of course, is the unaided response. And then the green color is the occluded response from the short IIC. And the pink is the occluded response from the deep IIC. So the first participant that you see right now in this example has a bit of a separation between the green, well, that's the short IIC, and the pink, which is the deep IIC. And here's something I want to emphasize for you guys in case you also want to use real ear measurements to measure occlusion. So basically, you do an objective measurement of the occlusion effect and quantify the amount of occlusion by looking at the difference between the unaided, that's the blue one, and the occluded measurements. Of course, I'm assuming you're not going to make 2 sets of IICs. If you do a deep impression and then the IICs is made from that deep ear impression, then you can just test it out without the IIC and with the IIC. Okay? Of course, if you see a bigger gap, so the bigger the difference between the occluded response and the unaided response, it indicates generally a bigger occlusion. And subjectively speaking, just so you guys know, when we asked this participant 1 how they felt, how they felt with the deep IIC, they say that the score is around 4, which is good. That means it's open enough. And then the short IIC is 2. So that means that this participant 1 felt the short IIC, felt it was a bit more occluding. So it matches with the information that we see here. There's definitely an occlusion effect being measured because of this. Now, let's look at participant number 2. So the second participant has a different pattern compared to the first participant. And this is because, again, ear canals are all different. We're very special in that sense. So if you look at the blue, I don't want to mark it now because I want you to see the curves. So if you look at the blue and the pink responses, it shows that the unaided results are almost similar and aligned with the deep IIC measurements. And this indicates that there is no occlusion with the deep IIC because it is very similar to the unaided response. Now, if you look at the green curve, that is the occluded response from the short IIC. And it really stands out. It's a bit more higher, suggesting that there is more occlusion with the short IIC. So the second participant rated the deep impression IIC as 5. That means it feels very open. And then the short impression IIC as 4, which is also open enough. So it's really interesting how subjectively what the participant tells you roughly aligns with the results that we get from this real ear measurement. And overall, if you compare the results from participant 1 and 2, let me see if I can erase. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So if you compare the results from participant 1 and 2, you will see that overall, participant 2 experiences less occlusion compared to participant 1. Let me just use my pen. Yeah. Because you can see here that there is not so much difference between the unaided and occluded response, while for participant 1, there is a bigger difference between the unaided and also the occluded response. So a much bigger difference with no hearing aids and with hearing aids. So basically, guys, what do we take from this? The results show that all ear canals are really different and occlusion is really a very individual experience. So it depends on the shape and the size of the ear canal as well as how deep you do the ear impression. A deep ear impression definitely allows an IIC to be built even deeper into the ear canal, and this can definitely help reduce the occlusion. And the final point I would like to make out is if you have an REM machine in your clinic, no matter what the brand, you can try to give this a go, and you can try to measure the occluded response. this could be a really valuable troubleshooting tool if your client is often complaining about occlusion. So these are the takeaways. And of course, even with an optimal ear impression, some clients may still experience occlusion. And here are 2 tips to help alleviate occlusion in the clinic. The first one is to modify the venting. So on average, the occlusion effect decreases when the diameter of the vent gets bigger or when the length of the vent gets shorter. You may be able to increase the size of the vent by modifying the hearing aid shell or by shortening the vent by trimming the shell. So you can definitely request this from the lab if you're not able to do it yourself. There may be cases where the hearing aid vent cannot be modified. So in this case, a new ear impression needs to be taken and the hearing aid sent for a remake with a different vent selected. Of course, you may also be able to help with the occlusion by making adjustments in the HearSuite software. So basically, you can increase the gain in 1 dB steps from 250 Hz to 750 Hz for the soft and also for the medium input or moderate input. Normally, you only need between 1 to 4 dB gain and not more than that. And this approach really sounds weird and counterintuitive because why would you increase the low frequency gain even more when someone is feeling the occlusion effect? And the reason is because what you are actually doing is you're making the sound of your client's voice from the hearing aid louder than the sound your client is hearing inside their head. That's occlusion. So in short, it balances out the sound so that your client does not hear the sound in their head as loudly or prominently. Just try this for yourself. The next time you see a patient, try to do this and try increasing the gain in 1 dB steps until your client perceives that their voice is moving from inside the head towards the front. And this should really help with this perception of the occlusion effect. Yeah, so that is mostly all that I have to say on best practices when it comes to getting the best optimal fit with the custom instruments. Just keep it in mind that it's not only for HearLink 50, it's for all custom instruments. And of course, to a certain degree, this also applies for earpieces that you have made. The deeper the earpieces, the better the sound. So in summary, HearLink 50 IIC and CIC are our most discreet hearing aids packed with the latest SoundMap 3 technology for this advanced sound quality. And most importantly, as with the evidence that I showed you earlier, getting a good ear impression can really help to get the most out of an IIC by potentially reducing wind noise and also occlusion. Here are the handouts that you will be receiving today. So just want to remind you guys that if you want all of these, you do have to make sure that you register in the registration page so that I can see your email so I can send it to you.